part of really good lesson planning is starting with some kind of map, a curriculum map, or in this case, a lesson series map. What we're looking at with your inquiry is an entire unit of study, from the very first thing that you do, which should be your entry-level assessment, all the way to the last culminating activity or assessment, your summative assessment. So what we need to do is start with a map of what that looks like and all the different moving parts that are going to happen during that unit of study. This is a larger unit of study. It should take anywhere from like a week and a half to a month, just depending on your students and depending on your grade level. So we are going to look at the essential components for instruction here. Now, there are some little line items like content area, grade level. These are going to help out your portfolio reviewer who may not know you really well. And it also helps me as I review your documents. It reminds me what you teach and at what grade you're instructing. And then you're going to just kind of give a ballpark beginning date, a ballpark ending date. This may change. As we know in instruction, when you're teaching, things kind of change as you go through. Some things take a little longer, some things don't. You can always modify these later. And then you're going to add your standards. Your state-adopted content standards may be the Common Core. If you're teaching a different subject area that uses the literacy standards, you can place those here, or maybe you'll have next-gen science standards here. And that's why it doesn't say Common Core. It's whatever state-adopted standards for that particular lesson. And then we've added a new component, which is your ELD standard or standards that you're going to integrate into the lesson series. Now, this is a new component and it might freak some people out. So I wanted to point out that there is a link here that takes you directly to the CDE website. And as you scroll down, you can see which grade you're in. And you click on that, it will give you the ELD standards for that grade. So I'm going to open up the grade 6 just to show you and slide down, and here it is. So it tells you these are some collaborative standards that you could incorporate, some interpretive, productive, etc. And the nice thing about this document is that it aligns directly with the Common Core standards for English Language Arts and literacy. So if I am using my ELA literacy standard, which I would suggest you do, you can just directly find it and align it to whatever ELD standard you want to incorporate. And this is, again, even if you don't have any English learners, you are responsible for understanding how to teach them and how to use the state-adopted content standards and ELD standards in order to do that. So this is brand new to all of us, but I think that just by navigating this and just by digging in, we're going to learn a lot more about how to instruct our English learners in that integrated manner. All right, coming back to the document, we're looking at some broad categories. We want to start with why. I always start with why. Why are we learning this? How are you going to help students to understand why they're learning it and how they're going to connect that to real life applications? And then the how and the what. What are the learning objectives and how are we going to incorporate those, communicate those to the families as well as the students in class? As we know, in telling our students about the learning objectives is usually no problem, but we want to make sure we're always thinking about families and thinking about how we can include them in the learning. So are you going to send home a newsletter? Will you send an email? Will you post it on your website or on your Google Classroom? We need to think about how you're going to impart those things to the parents. Then you want to think about assessment. Before we ever start a unit of study, you want to think about how you're going to measure knowledge. What will your entry-level assessment measure, and what will your summative assessment measure? Now, the summative is usually easier than the entry-level. The summative is going to measure the standards which you're teaching. But when you think about entry-level, I want you to consider that you probably want a blend of prerequisite knowledge as well as new knowledge. The reason for that is because we want to see growth. If you only do prerequisite knowledge on that entry level, there's a good chance that the majority of your students will pass with flying colors, and then you're not going to see growth and you'll have a hard time discerning whether or not students really grew throughout your unit. Next, we have differentiated instruction. I think you're noticing a theme here. Differentiated instruction is really important, and we want to make sure that you're incorporating some of those instructional strategies that you've brainstormed throughout modules A and B, or A and your last inquiry, and pull them in. think specifically about your English learners, special populations, and remember, special populations can be at both ends of the spectrum. We can have our GATE students that need to be pushed beyond where you are instructing the general group, the general population. So think about those. You can always go back to your documents from Module A and pull some of those differentiated instruction strategies that you looked up, and you just have a nice little list of specific ideas. Pull from those and just copy and paste them right into here. And then what accommodations will you use during the lesson series for students on an IEP, a 504, or in rare cases, an IHP, an individualized health plan? I did not say modifications because usually modifications are very specialized. That's when you actually change the curriculum and you're changing the standard for a student. You will know if you have a student on a modified curriculum. You're going to know right away. Most of the time, we're just accommodating. We're teaching them the exact same thing all of the other students are getting, but you might be adding more time for them, or you might be seating them in a place that's preferential. So those are types of accommodations. You may allow them to go to a different room for a test. And then last, you want to look at your materials and your technology. What are you going to need for the lesson series? You just want to have those things thought out and thought through before you start your lesson series. And we want to make sure we use technology in the interest of advancing student learning. Don't use technology for technology's sake, but also don't go old school when there is a better way to do it using technology. So think to yourself, am I going to use Chrome carts to help students become familiar before their smarter balanced assessments or performance tasks? Am I going to allow them to bring their own device and do something that's highly engaging? So think through those things on this form. And again, as with everything else, you can bullet point. Just make sure that you add specificity and show some depth in your thought and specifics. Don't just say, I'm going to differentiate. Explain how you're going to differentiate. All right, so I hope that helps. If you need anything, you know your CT and I are here for you.